Hi guys, it's Sophie. So I'm going to be doing my May wrap up today. I have no books to show you, which is slightly unusual as all my books are now packed. So I'm going to do it on my phone. I'll put some pictures up as we go through, so you still got to see what they look like as well. But yeah, if I turn you around a second, let's have a look. Yeah, can you see literally everything is in boxes right now. So we should be moving in like 2 months time, hopefully sooner, but kind of hopefully by the end of July we'll moved into my new house. I'm someone who likes to be very prepared, so we've been packing the whole way through rather than just like toward the end. So yes, I have just the books I've read more recently on my shelves, but I'm going to go through with pictures today because I think that feels easier to do and you get to see what they look like still, but then it's all kind of matches. So let me just scroll down on my phone. So the first book I have to talk about is The Faculty of Dreams by Stridsberg. This book was one that I was really excited for. It was one that I'd known about for a little while. I think it was on the Man Booker International this year. It's about a woman who tries to assassinate Andy Warhol and about her life kind of leading up to that event and her life following that event. I found the book absolutely fascinating, and I think the main reason I found it fascinating was that she holds some really abhorrent, like ardent feminist ideas, which are to the point where she kind of wants to hurt men. It was the kind of thing which I hadn't really read before, and I think the reason why I found it so fascinating was there was this question about, is she mad or does she really believe what she's saying? And I was asking myself that question throughout reading the book, and I think it's a really hard question to answer, and I think the answer might be both, that she does believe the things that she's saying, but also that's coming from a place of her being unwell. I really enjoyed it as a reading experience and I really would recommend it. It's quite dark and twisty, so just be aware if you're interested. The next one I read was Excavation, a memoir by Wendy Ortiz. And this is a story about, a true story memoir about a young girl who was groomed by her teacher and the impact that had on her. I thought it was quite a powerful book, but I didn't enjoy reading it very much, if that makes sense. Bits of it were just so gross, like even though when she's describing it she doesn't feel that she's been abused that badly or at all. Kind of in the reflection back when she's much older, it's very clear that she has, and some of the things she says about what he'd done or said to her when she was young, when you read them kind of clean, are so just disgusting and gross, but the character, but Wendy Ortiz as a child or as a teenager didn't recognise that. The next one I read was The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. So this is my first Agatha Christie that I've ever read. I actually listened to it as an audiobook, and I did enjoy it. I think Poirot was much more of a knob than I'd expected Poirot to be, and I also thought he was a lot older. I always thought he would have started out being younger and then been older as the books went on. I didn't realise he was like retired from the get-go. I think it was enjoyable and light, and I'd probably read another Agatha Christie, but probably on audiobook. I don't feel like a great desire to own them as physical books or to read like I loathe them. I'm glad I read one, and as I say, it was quite good for me in my like commuting back and forth to work. Then I listened to Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Doughty, and I loved this book. I know it's old news, lots of people have read this one already, but this is a story of a young woman who goes to work in the death industry. Specifically, she starts working in a crematorium. It's so gory and funny and too much at times, and I absolutely loved listening to it. If you haven't already read it, and I know loads and loads of people have, it is really worth listening to. It's also on Scribe, so if you have Scribed, you can find it on there. I've also subscribed to her YouTube channel, which is Ask a Mortician, and it's the same, like really good content there, so if you're into Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and you want to hear some more, there's definitely more available. Then I had a DNF of Baby and Other Stories by Paula Bomer. This is a short story collection, and it was one I got for my birthday as like a blind pick. The stories ended up just being, it wasn't even the darkness, but it was kind of like, it just felt like I was reading horrible stories about horrible men. I didn't feel like I got much from it other than the fact I was reading these stories about these horrible men. It didn't feel like I was learning anything or finding anything new. It just felt that was the focus. And yeah, I think in short I just decided that it wasn't really what I wanted to be reading at that minute, and it wasn't really bringing me anything, so I ended up DNFing it. And the next one I read was The Western Wind by Samantha Harvey. This is the one that Tom and I were going to read together, though Tom still hasn't read it. He's being naughty. And this is the story of a death in like historical fiction, but a death in a small town village of Somerset, and about the priest and the village kind of trying to find out what's happened. Was it a suicide? Was it an accidental death? I really like the setting and the kind of remoteness of it. There's this sense that it's completely separated off apart from this bridge, which is where everybody kind of put their hopes on the village being able to communicate with more people, and that doesn't work out. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would though. I think I'd had quite high hopes for it. I think a lot of people really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the process of reading it, but I think I found it quite forgettable. Then I listened to Jane Eyre on audiobook for the first time, and I've spoken about this a little bit in a couple of my last videos, so I'm not going to talk too much about the classics. Other than I enjoyed Jane Eyre, I enjoyed it far more than Pride and Prejudice, which is the next one that I read. I think I was worried that the classics of that particular canon were going to be very like Pride and Prejudice, and probably if I listened to Pride and Prejudice first, I wouldn't have listened to any of the others, to be honest. I'm really not into that like romancy, fluffy type of fiction. Jane Eyre obviously isn't that, but Pride and Prejudice really is. So I'm glad I read Jane Eyre first, or listened to Jane Eyre first, or I think I would have just given up entirely again. I do wonder whether when I was reading those classics when I was a kid, I ever picked up some of the more light and fluffy ones. I know I read Emma, and I can't remember how light and fluffy that one was, but maybe that put me off a bit. But yeah, so there was those two. The next was a DNF again. This was for my In Real Life book club, and this was Sour Heart by Jenny Zhang. Similarly to Baby, actually, I felt like a lot of this book, a lot of these short stories were designed to shock. They're telling stories of young immigrant girls who are in their, it's not kind of their fault, but what the result is that they're living in ways that are far too adult for where they are in their lives, and they're doing very nasty things. There was a scene of sexual assault quite early on, I think in story 1 or story 2, and that theme kind of continued through without, it felt like it was very bare and very sparse, and I have to say I was reading the stories waiting for the horrible thing that was going to happen, and again I just didn't really want that from it. Lots of other people in my group hated it too and didn't finish it, and I DNF'd it after about 4 stories. Then I listened to Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte in audiobook, which I really liked again. I had better luck with the Brontes than I did with Pride and Prejudice, but I found this one really scary, and I'm really glad I didn't read it when I was a kid, because I just, and the person who was doing the audible narration, the scribed narration of the version I listened to, made Heathcliff so scary. Like every time he was in the book and was talking, I was like, you know, make him go away. And I have to say, by the end, I pretty much wanted all of the characters to die, apart from like our main characters. I was just like, can they all just go away now, please? They're scaring me. I didn't get the sense at all that it was a love story, and I know that lots of people feel it's a love story. I didn't get that at all. I got the sense that there was this really weird possessive relationship, but I wouldn't have called it a love story at all. I did enjoy it. It wasn't what I was expecting from that book. I was expecting it to be more like Jane Eyre or Pride and Prejudice with some softness, and I didn't feel like Wuthering Heights had any softness to it. Again, I know other people have read this differently because I've seen lots of people talking about it differently. I really didn't think that at all. And the next one was Madness, Rack and Honey, which was a series of collected lectures from Mary Rueffle, and she mainly writes about poetry, I think that would be fair to say, but also talks about other subjects around poetry and uses poetry to explore those topics, things like she has a lecture on fear. I don't think I read enough poetry for this to have had as big of an effect on me as it would have done if it was about fiction, but for people who like poetry, I would be like 100% would recommend this. I really still enjoyed reading it, even with that caveat, but I didn't feel that I had as good of a reference to what goes on in poetry and things about like style and content. It's been a long time since I've studied that at school. I'm not reading a lot of it now. I did feel that I lacked a little bit for that, but I thought the essays were really interesting and a good range of essays, and it was interesting to see so many different things linked with poetry too. I thought that was really clever. So if you like poetry or write poetry, then I think that's one you might like. And then the next one I read was The Pisces by Melissa Broder, and this was for my In Real Life book club as well, and I really liked this book an awful lot. I know it's been really like Marmite. I found it really funny, and all of the really like erotic sexual scenes, I found them really funny too. It properly made me laugh out loud. It's a story about a girl who falls in love with a merman, essentially, but it's more than that. It's about like, I think the biggest thing for me is it reflected like what it can be like as a woman trying to date in the current era, and that's what made me laugh, I think, was the relatability of that element. And I don't think it deserves the hate that it's been getting from sort of sections of people who don't like that. I don't think it's a bad book. I think it's a really funny book. I think it's almost like it's too much, I think, would be what I would say, and I can get why people didn't like that. But I do think it's doing a really specific thing, and I think it does it really, really well and entertainingly, and I really liked it for that. And the next one I read was Ordinary People by Diana Evans. This was one that I'd kind of picked up, I think, a little bit on a whim, really. I knew lots of other people were talking about it and enjoying it. I knew it had been compared to Sally Rooney's Normal People, though I think it's way more like Conversations with Friends. And it's the story of like interlocking coupledom and relationships and affairs and marriage. This is one I can imagine that I would have really enjoyed if I read it later in my life. Where I am now, like pre-marriage, like I'm still in the like serious relationships but not that serious relationship stage of my life. And to be honest, it just kind of freaked me out a little bit. I read quite a lot of stuff, not necessarily like by choosing, but just because it comes up quite a lot in kind of literary fiction, about men getting bored of their wives and leaving. And I think like I'm at the stage of my life where I kind of don't want that to be the story necessarily. I kind of still want to have some hope that there are people who are in committed long-term married relationships who don't fuck around. And I found reading it, that would probably put me off a little bit. And I think the dynamics of married life are something I don't understand as well. I'm just not there yet. So I think if you're a little bit further down the line of life than I am in that respect, it might ring a bit more true for you, a bit more interesting for you. But I didn't feel like it hit me in the same way that Say Normal People did, which was more close to the kind of age and life experience that I'm at the moment. And then the very last one is another classic I listened to on audiobook, and that is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Bronte. And I think this is my favourite of the 4 kind of Victorian classics that I've read this month. This is about a woman who escapes from an abusive husband to live alone in a kind of beaten down old house to get away from him and start anew. We hear kind of her story from the current day perspective, and also her story told through letters when she was in the relationship with this man. This was the book that felt most like, of all of the 4 of them, the book I would choose to read if it was set now. So I think it had some things in terms of like theme and the approach to it that would have really interested me regardless of whether or not it was a classic. And this was the one that apparently is the one that's least like celebrated, but it was definitely the one for me that felt the most interesting and nuanced. I really loved our main character of Helen. I thought that she was very strong but also relatable in the sense that she wasn't ending this abusive relationship. She still thought she had something to give to it. I didn't see her so much as like a martyr and a self-sacrificing person as much as I did see her kind of trapped by the marriage and trapped by an abuser. And that was most definitely the one I enjoyed the most. So I have read quite a lot this month, though it doesn't feel like I have, and I think that's partly because a lot of what I've read has just gone straight into boxes, and it's a little bit of a weird liminal thing when you haven't got the books you've read hanging around you. But hopefully this has been enjoyable. I'm not going to do a TBR for June. I've only got, I think, like 4 books on my TBR at the moment. I'm trying to read everything I have by the time we leave, so I'll probably have a different 4 books next month, or the ongoing cycle of books being read and put away. So I'll probably see you again for a haul, I think, because as I say, that rotation of books means I've had a few new ones coming in, but my books are likely, the books I'm talking about in these videos are likely to be the same books I'm then going to be wrapping up, because buying, hauling, reading, wrap up. So they're all going to kind of be the same. So do excuse me in this period when the books I have are smaller, and yeah, I may do a few like more in-depth reviews as well to try and get a bit more content out of what I'm reading and what I have. So let me know if you'd be interested in me doing that. Yes, I'll talk to you guys again soon, and look after yourselves until then. Bye!